what I told Mike is I live in Washington, D.C. Mike lives out here. We needed to find some common ground. And as Zach said, things are going to get controversial. So I thought we might play a game, lightning round game. And so who here has seen the Pitchfork web series Over Under? Okay, well, this will be fun for you. And the rest of you, maybe later, you'll think it's funny. So I should also say my mom's a librarian, I am a researcher, and so I went probably like a year and a half deep on Mike's Twitter feed. And
oh boy.
Yeah. Decentralized networks. And also listened to basically every podcast he's been on in the last year and a half. So these topics are drawn from those and the fact that we both spent some time in Austin.
Yep.
Okay, so first topic, over, under, or overrated, underrated, Oren's hummus.
Underrated.
Yeah.
Yeah, has anybody ever been
answer.
to Oren's Hummus in Palo Alto? So I just think it's really good, and I think Oren's a good guy, and I'm rooting for him.
And Mike recently posted a selfie of him and Oren, which I thought it was like very touching.
Yeah, we had this founders brunch, and I offered to have it at my place, and Oren's there from Oren's Hummus.
Did he bring hummus?
No, he didn't.
Rude.
If I knew he was coming, I would have asked him.
Yeah. All right. Well, maybe next time. Yep. Noted investigative journalist John Stossel. Over or under?
Under. I think that there's a lot of loudmouth talking voices on TV that are just noise that actually pollute your brain rather than make it smarter. And I think that actually Stossel's pretty reasonable.
I agree. That is the right answer. Yeah. Okay.
I'm glad.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Okay, cool.
Artificial intelligence. Over under?
It's a terrible name.
Yeah.
So it's a name that doesn't really describe what it's about, and it's a name that induces fear in non-technical people because it sounds like somehow it's going to replace human intelligence or be a threat. So it's overrated, but the implications of the right phrasing of it is underrated.
Oh, good. We'll talk about comms later.
Okay.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, okay.
The greatest athlete of all time, Serena Williams.
I would say underrated for the following reason. I think that there's a lot of attention about whether she did the right thing or not at the latest U.S. Open, but I think that it's very difficult for an athlete to perform at the level that she's performed for so long. And I think that we underappreciate people in our society who perform at a level of excellence and have staying power. So I think she stood the test of time, and when we look back on her career, I think that she's going to have acquitted herself well that way.
Yeah. So this is possibly unfair, but neither of us live there anymore. So Austin City Council, underrated, overrated. And the reason I ask is because you said something on Twitter, and then you said something on Twitter about thinking twice before investing in certain companies in Austin because the city council had made some kind of regulatory decisions that you thought were overreaching, and the local press really jumped on it. So,
I guess I'd say underrated right now. I think the thing I learned about that situation is that in Silicon Valley, we have a tendency to only want to talk to government when we're mad about what they're doing. And, that's not a great way to have a relationship with people. And what I find now is a better model is to try to be the person that someone in government would talk to if you want the well-reasoned pro-tech case for something, rather than just being a shill for tech. And if I have a regret, it's that I didn't know the people in the Austin City Council really at all before any of this stuff happened with Lyft and Uber. And I don't agree with how they handled things, but then again, it's like, it's easier to stay out of trouble than to get out of it once you're in it.
Right.
And so I'd rather try to do that in the future a little more.
That's really refreshing. Yeah. That we've all learned, right?
Yeah.
In this
I hope so.
scenario. Yeah. So you have said, and I think this is sort of the thesis for this conversation, the most valuable businesses of the future will be networks rather than traditional companies. And
Yeah.
you kind of got your start, or you were behind some of what I think many people in this room would recognize as key companies, Twitch and Twitter. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about your origin story, your sort of peer-to-peer aha moment, and how you got involved.
Yeah. So, and hopefully this won't be too long-winded.
I'll cut you off.
Okay. Good. Okay. Cool. So, when I moved to Silicon Valley in 2005, I kind of had this theory about how business was changing, and so most of us, when we think of businesses today, we think of corporations with shareholders and a CEO and a board of directors. But what most of us don't appreciate is that that's not really how business was 150 years ago, right? So 150 years ago, we were just starting to do a transcontinental railroad, and no individual had enough money to build a transcontinental railroad, and so J.P. Morgan helped get the railroads funded by selling stock. But he had to convince people in Europe that they wanted to buy stock in a railroad off in America, because that's where most of the money came from. And so it's at the turn of the century, like at late 1900s, it was a while before they even called these stocks the industrials. Like at the beginning, they called them the transportationals or something like that, because all of the valuable big companies were railroads, right? And then Edison did the light bulb, and you had General Electric, and you had all these companies emerge, and they created just extraordinary abundance, right? So the last from 1800 to 2000, the GDP per capita went up 14-fold in real terms. And so what I started to believe was that mass production and mass distribution, which characterize the modern corporation, were going to yield to mass computation and mass connectivity. And so mass computation, another way people describe that is Moore's law. And but it's not just chips. It's about how fast can you sequence the genome, how much storage can you put in for $1 over time, that kind of thing. And mass connectivity, people tend to talk in terms of Metcalfe's law. And so, a network becomes exponentially more valuable with the number of nodes. And so the meta investment thesis was that because Moore's law and Metcalfe's law are exponential, they can both bring abundance, and that there would be a new type of capitalism, a network capitalism, that would have the opportunity to bring abundance to everybody in the world, but that the types of companies that would get created would be different. And so in the early days, I invested in pure play networks like Twitter and Twitch. But later on, I started to believe that networks would affect every sector of the economy, transportation, real estate, money itself. And so I started to invest in companies like Lyft and cruise automation for self-driving. And then more recently, we've gotten pretty enthusiastic about cryptocurrency and those types of things.
Speaking of money itself.
Yeah.
I think so one of the things I didn't ask you in the over-under is Bitcoin over or under, but clearly this is somewhere you've put some focus recently. And earlier we had a little chat about it. I think your view goes beyond the sort of, oh, this is cool perspective. So I'm hoping you can share some of that with folks.
Yeah. So one of the things that I'm enthusiastic. So I think that there's really two things that are interesting about crypto. We'll talk about money crypto first. So I like to say there's money crypto and tech crypto, and money crypto is this idea of the possibility of a return to sound money. And so it used to be that if you owned a dollar or pretty much any currency, you could go to the central bank and have that be exchanged for a certain number of bars of gold. And what happened was over time, we did two things that I think harmed sound money. The first was when the Fed became overly interventionist by setting interest rates. And then the second is when the government got off the gold standard progressively until we just blew it off completely and decided that we just print money whenever we feel like it. And so why is that bad? Let's just take printing too much money. Right now, financial engineering is growing at twice the rate of our GDP. And right now, more than
When you say financial engineering, you mean?
the growth of income and profits and appreciation
Yep.
for financial.
Okay.
But even, just as bad, more than half of stock price appreciation in the last few years in the Fortune 500 is attributable to share buybacks rather than actual real growth. I like to call it fake growth. And so if you look at the social injustice of that, let's say that your parents played by the rules their whole life and decide to save their money. Well, what interest rate are they getting on the money that they save? They're getting an interest rate that's lower than a price set by supply and demand. It's set by an artificially reduced government interest rate. Where is that money going when it gets printed? It's going to Wall Street so they can loan $100 billion to IBM to buy back their own stock. So this year alone, we're going to see people estimate there to be $800 billion a year spent in the Fortune 500 on share buybacks. Does that help the middle class? No. It helps speculators, and it contributes to a zero-sum thinking even within the management of the company itself. Because when you generate a profit dollar as a business, you have a choice of what you can do with it. You can dividend it to the shareholders. You can buy back stock. If you're a car company, you can invent the next Tesla. If you're a phone company, you can invent the next iPhone. But that takes more investment, and more time, and more risk. You can also decide to use that money to make machines that let you fire people and replace them with machines. Or you can use that money to lobby the government to get handouts and be a rent seeker. But the problem with the Fed jacking with the money supply and us having not sound money principles is that people get rewarded for activities that are not long-term productive for the economy and society, and that make it unfair for the people that follow the rules and try to produce real growth and real value. And so, to me, Bitcoin is profound for a couple of reasons. One is, right now, I'm a customer of money. I have no alternative but fiat currency. I mean, I could go to different fiat currency. I could go to the yen or the pound, but they're all sort of, the dollar is the global reserve currency, and all these central banks are in collaboration with each other, contributing to an unsound money regime. So Bitcoin allows me as a customer of money to say, guess what, governments? If you don't have sound money, I'm going to take my money business elsewhere. I'm going to buy this peer-to-peer decentralized money. And it'll be good not just for me, because the dollar compared to gold continues to deflate, and we pretend that it doesn't. But what it also causes is it forces the government to be accountable for the quality of its money, because now it's going to have to compete. And all great capitalist outcomes happen when you have choice among competing alternatives. And so I want to see a world where all of us are customers of money, and all of us have the opportunity to take our money business elsewhere if we're not satisfied with the government's stewardship of money. So anyway, sorry, long answer.
No, so I see. Fan.
Yeah.
He also likes over/under too. So.
And just one other thought with the Fed. We like to joke about, but it's sad that Venezuela has pricing controls, and a lot of countries do. And we say that's stupid because it is stupid. Let's say that we declared the price of apples are $100. Well, I'm not going to buy many apples if they cost $100. But the people who produce apples will say, this is awesome. I'm going to make as many apples as I can make. So what happens? You have too many apples. Let's say you price an apple for a penny. People start saying, hey, I'd rather eat apples than a lot of other things I eat. What would happen, though? People wouldn't produce any because they'd say, I only get paid a penny for apples, right? So there are reasons that price controls don't work. Pricing matters because it signals to the producers how much they should make. And it allows people to exercise their preference among alternatives. Well, then why does the government price money? It's like the most important thing that should have a free price. But yet we just automatically assume that the government should price money. And so when you have price controls for the most important thing to be governed by free markets, you're going to have crony capitalism, and you're going to have people who play by the rules get shafted at the expense of people who shuffle money around and are close to the money hose supply. And so, what I'd like to see is that's the other thing is interest rates. Bitcoin creates a possibility of a world where interest rates are set by supply and demand for money, not politicians trying to stimulate the economy and control the economy.
Yeah, I think, we talked earlier about how this is an interesting view on networks sort of having an impact on things like we talked about the Austin City Council and Uber and Lyft and regulation, a very specific regulation. And so we can understand, background checks, and that kind of regulatory environment, we intuitively understand that connection. But until you started talking about Bitcoin and the financial system, I was like, oh, now I understand what people are talking about. Now I actually get it. And that leads me to earlier in our conversation just now, we talked about messaging and how important it is to have a good message and be a good messenger. And you said something to me about we need some more grown-up language in tech. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So first of all, kind of just back to this idea of, the wealth of networks. People sometimes say, well, we've had software networks for a while. What's new? What's the big deal? And to me, the tipping point was the iPhone, because the iPhone put smart connectivity, eventually smartphones, in the hands of billions of people. And so we've always had software, or at least we've had it for a while, but corporations used to use software to run their corporations better. Burger King used software to figure out how many hamburgers they've sold, or to manufacture hamburgers better, or to have better supply chains or whatnot. But they're still in the business of selling hamburgers and fast food. What's happened now, though, is that these new network-centric software-defined businesses are literally undefined without software-defined. Like Uber and Lyft cannot exist as companies without being software-defined, network-centric companies. And the corporate-centered company will never win against the network software-defined company unless they're protected by the government. Like, taxis will not exist as we know them in a fundamental way unless the government protects them from ride sharing and self-driving cars, because the network capitalist just has more weapons. They have the ability to use algorithms and software to do things that usually you had to do by hand or manually or with physical goods rather than bits. And so the problem, though, that we have in Silicon Valley is by using this immature language, we empower the rent seeker. So, like, how often do you hear people say, we disintermediate this, we disrupt that, we move fast and break things, software eats this and that? And the problem with that is that induces fear in people who aren't building these companies. And why does that matter? Well, it matters because the other side of the argument is the taxi lobby or the hotel lobby or these types of people. And if we fail to make the case for abundance, if we fail to make the case for the fact that these technologies are exponentially improving and bring abundance to every man, woman, and child and generation, the rent seekers win that argument. And the rent seekers are quoting our own words to these city councils. They're saying, don't take my word for it. Look at what Travis Kalanick says. Look at what all these guys running these tech companies say. And so I just think that we need to do a way better job of helping people understand the opportunity for everybody to gain from this, rather than use immature, kind of juvenile, disrupt this. When an entrepreneur pitches me and says, I'm going to disrupt something, I'm like, well, why do you want to disrupt anybody? Like
Leave them
Logan,
alone.
like
Let them have a nice life.
Logan and John, when they started Lyft, they didn't say death to taxis, right? They were like, ride sharing would be awesome. And so, I think when an entrepreneur comes in and talks about what they're going to disrupt, I think they're getting bad advice. I think that they are getting bad guidance from the people who tell them how to think about their business, how to describe it.
Yeah. Is there someone who does this well? Is there sort of a tech person who does this well?
One of the people I respect in this front is Patrick Collison at Stripe. And so I think Patrick Collison makes a really good case, not just for his product and what it does for small business, but just the potential for increased vibrancy in small business. And he's very, very careful to make the positive grow the pie case for things rather than who gets the bigger slice case.
Yeah. Going just a step further beyond having better language, what could the tech industry be doing to help policymakers understand them better. We heard earlier today there's some sort of concrete suggestions, but you're a VC, and so your thing, your raison d'etre is finding the thing that no one has thought about. So, I'm just kidding, but I am interested.
Yes, I guess the main thing that I find about Silicon Valley is we just need to get out more. And so it's related to how we talk to politicians, but it's also like, you read these blogs about, I went to some red states to talk to people why they voted for Trump. And they don't even understand how implicitly arrogant their language is. Like, it's like they talk about it as if they went to a zoo to study a creature in their natural habitat. and then they go talk to these folks about, would you like universal basic income? And it's like, now let's say you're somebody in a red state. Like, you've grown up playing by the rules, getting hosed by a bunch of speculators, paying for the casino capitalism that occurred in the late 2000s. And now somebody comes to you and says, hey, well, I understand you probably are not good enough to compete in the global economy. So in order for you not to bring out your pitchforks towards me, how about I just give you some free money? How would you like that? Universal basic income. And I'm like, people in red states aren't looking for better welfare. That's like their dream for their kid is, and I want my kid to have better welfare than he has today. What they want is they want to know that if you play by the rules of the American dream, that you're not going to get shafted by people who play shell games with the American dream. And so, and it is similar with DC, right? We go out there and talk to them, and we come in with this premise of, well, we know all this stuff that you don't know, or why did you pass this stupid law? Or we only talk to people when we're mad at them about something.
Yeah.
And so, if we're going to be more than just, network capitalism to me was the tech industry quit being just the tech industry. And the tech industry became the sort of the fabric of the economy, the engine of the economy. Well, you've got to be willing then to engage with DC as a partner, and you got to recognize they have their interests and we have ours. But you can't just assume that people are stupid and corrupt and just beholden to lobbyists and stuff like that. They have a set of constraints of how they run their business just the way we do. And if you don't take time to appreciate and understand their constraints, you're kind of part of the problem, not part of the solution. And so, but I think writ large, it's get out more. Like I was talking to a journalist the other day, and they were saying that, we're not biased. We do try to seek the truth. And I said, look, if more than 80% of your people at your newspaper all voted for one candidate, it's axiomatic that you're biased. It's not that you're bad people. It's not that you're saying, hey, my job is to be biased today. The problem is whenever you debate a topic, the other point of view just doesn't show up in your newsroom. And so, of course, you're gonna present Donald Trump's tax plan. Like, I don't agree with all of it, but have we had a rational presentation about free trade in the press? We have not. Have we had one about his tax law? We haven't. And there's a lot of stuff I dislike about what Trump's doing, but we have not had a mature dialogue as a country about what kind of a trade regime we want to have and what we want to do when other people don't play by the rules that we're willing to play by. We're not willing to have an intelligent conversation about, isn't it kind of stupid that our companies keep money offshore because of our dumb tax laws? Those are valid conversations to have, but we're not having them. And it's not because people are cravenly biased. It's because when this legislation gets proposed, everybody thinks the same way. And so there's no reason to debate about the topic. Well, that's the problem I see in Silicon Valley, right? Silicon Valley is an intellectual monoculture. And so we have this belief that we all know things that nobody else knows and that we're way better, smarter, faster than anybody else. And nobody knows how to operate at our clock speed. And so let us come in and explain to you how it's done. And we don't realize that the power of the microchip and networks, it's like having a gun in a knife fight. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you're a good fighter. It's just you got better weapons. And maybe just a tiny bit of humility would be a good thing. And so, but in order, you got to understand somebody's perspective, you got to get out there. I like to think, when I talk to Mormons, they go on missions to convert other people. I think Silicon Valley need to go out on missions to be converted, right? To like understand that like other people think different ways and they're kind of rational and they're not just stupid and racist and like all a bunch of bad things just because they disagree with you.
And there's our controversy.
Yeah.
No,
Sorry.
in our last minute, you read a lot. You try and read 3 books a week.
Yeah.
Which, like, I mean, I made it through an article this morning, so, and I had to. I was paid to read it. Who are you reading lately? What should we be reading?
I've been liking this book called The Bitcoin Standard. I'll mispronounce the author's last name, but I think that one's interesting. It talks a lot about the history of money. I think it's fascinating to become educated in the history of money and like why it works and experiments that have been done in the past that didn't work. So I like that. Another one that I like is Prediction Machines.
Yeah.
And so it's a book about AI and what, to save people a few hundred pages of reading. The basic thesis of the book is that the value of AI is really to make predictions. And so if you think about human decision making, it's a combination of, at least in uncertainty, it's a combination of prediction and judgment. And so if you think about predictions one day going from expensive to being free, then you start to think of in what areas of business will judgment be more valued, those people will tend to do better. In what areas of business is a prediction enough, those, you would argue, businesses aren't going to do as well. They'll be commoditized. And so anytime, whether it's microprocessing or communications bandwidth, anytime you think something's going to be free someday, there's a whole lot of interesting thought experiments that you run about, what would you invest in, what's going to be valuable, where's value going to shift to?
Yeah, that mindset of abundance. That's very interesting. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. What a pleasure. Please join me in thanking Mike and Lincoln.
Thanks. Nice to meet you, Ellen. Thank you.